Chapter 8. That year I met Elena, who would be my only girlfriend throughout high school. I had her and Hosea. Hosea brought a smile to my face every morning. Elena helped me bring me into the world of music and ballet. Classical music, compositions, dance, literature. Oh, and theater. I was banned from ballet. My parents insisted that dance was the gateway to sin, sex, and corruption. In secret, Elena taught me and I learned. There were mornings I woke and slipped her toe shoes on first thing. Before my feet ever touched the ground, I was in tow. I do miss wearing toe shoes. Up to this point, my father had started telling me that I was more than just selfish. He also made it clear that I was beautiful, that I was too smart to be a girl, and that I should have been a boy. I began dressing like boys, loving boys, idolizing boys. I wanted to be like them. Then maybe my father would like me. Father would berate me and openly say he feared me while telling me how wonderful Marie was and how she was. Oh, she truly was wonderful. Marie was everything I could have been. My half-brother proceeded to beat me, and I had stopped eating almost completely. Most nights I listened to Sean scream from the other side of the door, "I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna fucking kill you!" You can hear that only so many times before you believe it. During those times I slipped into my worlds. The more I read, the more worlds came to me. I added a subterranean lake that was illogically bathed in moonlight to my list. Those worlds, that lake, the room with the onyx cats and Ireland, they all became very real to me. Much more real than the life I lived, where a monster threatened to kill me on the other side of the door. Doors. Doors were my savior and my bane. Sean took to torturing my cats when he failed to get the response out of me, and it worked every time. Nothing could draw me from my room save for my cats and an irrational need to rescue them from his perverse monstrosities. I was afraid to leave them, and I lived forever afraid for them. The only thing that provided me solace were the felines he made scream on the other side of the door. My nightmares were frequent and vivid. I dreamt of such dark things. Wrapped in a giant spider web while spiders feasted on me. War. So many dreams of war. I was in a foxhole with grenades and guns. Dismembered bodies, mutilated corpses surrounded me. Dolls with melted faces. Marionettes. I'm terrified of marionettes. And of puppets. Even now I feel the rising sick and I'm swallowing back mouthfuls of vomit. I was only 8 and those pictures, those images, forever seared in my head. Every time I remember, I want to vomit. There was one woman, one vile woman, who I will not forget. She was the monitor of my 2nd to 5th grade Christian classroom. She was a monster who lived her life resenting all others because she was unmarried and alone. Okay, I'm not going to lie. This woman looked, acted, and sounded like Harry Potter's Dolores Umbridge. I kid you not. I knew a Dolores Umbridge. She was determined to shove every bit of Christian goodness down our throats, and she did it by every means she knew how. With that damn smile of hers and her batting of the eyelashes on her plump face. She loved showing us Christian horror movies. Yes, there is such a genre, but there was one that makes me sick to this day. The movie was white, pure white. The walls, the rooms, the sets, the things, all white. And there were these teenagers who weren't Christian. In contrast, they were dirty and black. Not the beautiful black you see at night, but a cold, cruel gray, like a green gray fermenting body. The main character loathed this Christian puppet show that aired every night, so he and his friends rallied up and sought out the studio. The perfect white studio was black that night when they broke in and trashed the place. I am still so sick from this. I watched the teens shred the dolls. The ugly backs streaked their faces as they dumped paint across the white walls, broke everything in the room, ripped the eyes off the dolls. And I don't know why it makes me sick. I don't know why. Later you see the boy beaten by his father with a stick. Everything was either stark white or ugly black. To this day I'm terrified of dolls and puppets. I don't even know if this is relevant, but it felt like right now to mention it. Stringed marionettes and cold porcelain faces. The death men in their steel room with no doors. Blue light, moonlight forever fills that steel room. It is dark and wide. The ceiling I cannot see. It's so cold and there are no doors. Only figures, tall men, dressed in cloaks like wraiths. They surround me and fill every inch of that room. They will hurt me, but I cannot run. I cannot escape. They peer down ever closer, And I want to run, but I can't. And just as they reach for me, they are gone, and I'm alone in that room. It's empty. And I'm on my knees, curled up naked and cold in the blue moonlight. I am alone. The room, the deaf men, the eternal ceiling with light pouring in. It all scares me. The only way out is up, but I cannot reach, and I cannot run. But what I hate most of all is that the deaf men come and go and change. Like lights flickering on and off, the deaf men are there, suffocating me in that room. And then they're gone. They're back again, then gone. Sometimes they're there as men of average height dressed as death. Sometimes they are 3 times taller than that of a man, so tall you cannot see me kneeling at their feet. I'm lost in the thick of their black robes. Then they flicker, the scene changes, and they are normal. It flickers again, and they're tall. It's an inconsistent and rapid change, and the change is what scares me. There are no doors. I cannot get out. I am alone in that room with the deaf men, and I cannot get out. My half-brother was messed up. As early as 3, Sean stole things, and my mother would laugh and say how cute she thought it was. When I was in 3rd grade, Sean was found with a large stash of trinkets and things he stole from our classmates. As punishment, the Umbridge woman did what any sensible Christian did. She stood him in front of the entire class, announced his sin, and made him give back every item he stole and apologize. Humiliation galore. I watched Sean hold back the tears and hand each item back. It took 2 hours to complete that task. I think the punishment scarred my half-brother far deeper than anyone realizes. I think the level of humiliation turned Sean to resentment, and I don't blame him one bit. I'm all for teaching a lesson and holding a person responsible. I also believe humiliation can be overdone. I believe there is a point where humiliation stops teaching the correct lesson and turns to scars instead. That day, the Umbridge woman and my parents took his humiliation to a whole other level. It was after this incident that the Umbridge woman verbally came after me. She hated me and was adamant that I was just like my half-brother. I hate those words. My half-brother was 1 year older, which means teachers met him first, then greeted me with, "Do you want to be like your brother?" I hated it when they called him my brother. My brothers, Charles and Eugene, were my brothers, and were nothing like Sean. I hated him being lumped in the same group as them. I inherited a lot of Sean's teachers. The Umbridge woman was the first, only she was already convinced that I was just like Sean. By the time I was 8, my eyesight was bad. We were in charge of grading our own papers with scorekeepers. One day, I misaligned my answers with the answers key, and I was marking wrong answers right and right answers wrong. Just as I marked the wrong answer right, Umbridge looked over my shoulder and pointed at the page. "That was wrong! You're lying!" she screamed. She took me by the arm and dragged me down the hall to an empty room. I remember her grip on my arm. It hurt so much. Her sausage fingers clamped my little 8-year-old arm, and she shoved me into that room at the end of the hall. For 30 minutes she told me exactly what she thought of me, how selfish I was, how vile, how ungrateful I was, and how I was just like Sean. She called me a liar and a cheater and spoiled. She told me my mother was right to call me a liar, that if I didn't change I would be just as vile as my half-brother. I stood there, fuzzying up my eyes. I can control how unfocused my eyes get. That day I unfocused them so much that I couldn't recognize the blob of fuzz in front of me. I hated her. I loathed her. And to this day I detest her. I took to staying up as late into the night as I could to avoid the nightmares and the death men. I hated sleep. I couldn't eat without remembering how selfish I was, how unwanted I was. I learned to take very little. I learned to want nothing more. I learned something else during those nights. When all the world slept, a new silence settled into the forest. With candle in hand and dressed in gowns of gossamer, I would slip out into the night and dance to the sound of silence. Barefoot, I would spin, then lay in the cool grass in a strip of moonlight. I would lie there all night and gaze up at the stars, so silent, so clear there in the wood, so far away. I lived between worlds, the war, my reality, my hell, and this world in the forest of fantasy. And I'm stuck. I can't go back. I forever toggle between 2 worlds, and one is ever so much more real to me than yours. At night, beneath the moon, I didn't need my worlds to escape. I only needed to open my eyes and see the world as it was, quiet and calm and at peace, just as I still see it. I escaped through music and wrote poetry to ease the pain, and letters. I poured so much of my heart into the letters I wrote to Eric, who I could see so easily on the other side. I still have them, every letter I ever wrote him. During those times when the world was dark, Eric came more real to me than anyone else. He was quiet. He listened. He held me in the silence. He played his violin for me, and he loved me. When I cried, I closed my eyes and I felt him envelop me. Only Eric and the cats ever came. No matter how long and loud I cried, my parents, no one ever came. I was 14. I was alone, and all I wanted was for somebody to love me.